Good afternoon. This is the continuation of the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for July 23. We have item up 11A, which is a combined item of a second reading and an ordinance. So I'll read the whole thing and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Orlandini to introduce our panel. This is the second reading and public hearing on ordinance number PA 1377 in the matter of amending the Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan, RCP, to adopt the 2019 Solid Waste Management Plan, SWMP, a special purpose plan of the RCP, as an amendment to the adopted SWMP, and adopting a savings and severability clause, and ordinance number 19-04 in the matter of amending Lane Code 16.404 to reference the 2019 Solid Waste Management Plan adopted with Ordinance PA 1377 and adopting a savings and severability clause. File number 509-PA-19-05381. The applicant here is Lane County Public Works. And I want to introduce Jeff Orlandini, Waste Management Division Manager, and you can introduce the folks at the panel, and we will have an introduction by you after you introduce everybody, and after your presentation, we'll open the public hearing and follow the script that you've provided.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, again, my name is Jeff Orlandini. I'm the Division Manager for Waste Management, and with me I have one of our waste reduction specialists, Sarah Grimm, as well as Josh Proudfoot from Good Company, who worked on this master plan, put it together, and took us through this process to get here. So they're here to assist with any questions or additional feedback we may need. And you want me to go ahead and go into our presentation?
Maybe I should go down the list of the items here. So we want to make sure that people understand that this is a public hearing. Today's date is July 23, 2019. The proposed rural comprehensive plan and Lane Code amendments are subject to applicable criteria at Lane Code 12.005, 12.050, 16.252, sub 2 and 16.400. Additionally, as part of the criteria, consistency with statewide planning goals and Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan policies and elements are required. The order of proceedings for this hearings will be first a report by staff, followed by public testimony, and then additional comments by staff. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to enable a response may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the public hearing, any participant may request that the record be left open to provide an opportunity to present additional written evidence or arguments regarding the application. However, the board is not obligated to leave the record open. The board's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with ORS Chapter 197. At this time, I'm going to call for a disclosure by any commissioner for extensions due to conflicts of interest or biases, or disclosure of any other possible conflicts of interest. Are there any others? I will state for the record that that on one of these items, and I don't know which one it is, I was informed by LMD staff, not Waste Management, LMD staff, that Sean Malone from Landwatch Lane County had written a letter to the board or put something in the record. Maybe that's the next item. But anyway, I wanted to make clear that I have done some legal work with him, and I'm continuing to do legal work with him, not involving Lane County, not involving Oregon, and not involving this matter or the other matter that we're and have not discussed it with him. So at this time, I'll call for any challenges to the board's qualification to hear this matter. Hearing none, we'll move on to the fifth item, which is report by staff. And after the report by staff, I'd like to invite the board to hold questions until after the public testimony. Okay, go for it.
Thank you very much. So we have presented our plan to you previously, and so our intention is not to do that same presentation again. So we have an abbreviated presentation for the benefit of any members from the public, and then we anticipate that taking 15 minutes or less, and then we can take comment. So first, we want to just, again, review the process of how we got to where we're at. And so on the left of this slide, we have the different groups involved initially in our plan. And to get us here, we did an evaluation review. A lot of that was of our previous plan from '02. We did our draft development. We brought it to an external stakeholder review. And that is usually our stakeholders that we meet with that are cities and commercial haulers, recycling entities, universities, that group of stakeholders who kind of have a stake in the waste in Lane County. And then we did adjustment of the plan per that feedback. And then we came to this body and did the presentation, and now we're here today to do the public hearing to get that last step of feedback if desired, and then hoping that we will then approve the plan and then move forward with implementing it. There are 5 focus areas to our plan: facilities, management, partnership, programs, and revenue. Those are mainly for the sake of structure, although there is some overlap between those. So some of them may have 10 or 15 items, others may have 3, but they do overlap. So going through these focus areas, we have our facilities. We've highlighted at most 7 in each of these areas just as a kind of big picture idea of what we're doing. The comprehensive plan obviously has the full picture. So one of the things is to develop recovery capacity both for compacted and uncompacted, but mainly recovering out of the uncompacted. So those are transfer station waste and processing that loose waste. Although we are also looking at how we might be able to divert some waste from compacted loads as well. Explore new alternative methods of waste treatment and recovery. The big one is trying to site our new central transfer station, rebuilding that and finding a location for that. Our rural transfer station enhanced operational efficiency recovery plan gets into trying to determine how we can expand the options at our rural transfer station so that we can recover more. Right now, those high value items are the easiest ones, are things like maybe yard debris, wood recovery. We've done our electronic waste at 5 additional sites. So looking at ways we can expand options at rural sites. Leachate management is a very big priority for us in Lane County with the rain that we get. So just trying to determine better ways to manage that. And then, again, working on expansion with the goal towards increasing recycling opportunities and markets and options. And as always, want to reduce greenhouse gas and particulate air emissions in our own operations. Moving to our management, the biggest goal really that I think people are realizing is a 63% waste recovery by 2025. And so when I say overlap, that's really what we're talking about. So these recovery options are going to help us achieve that goal. And then also we want to review and analyze how we can work with partners, whether that's collection service franchises, developing data for collection and reporting systems that determine that we're being most effective and efficient with the resources. A lot of these would be partnering with other cities and groups, public and private. Exploring the option of doing a joint powers authority with urban cities or county-wide if interest is there. It could also be reanalyzing our governmental agreements between cities and the county to determine if we could do something with those. Product stewardship is a big one, trying to figure out ways that we might be able to, instead of just wondering, what we do when something's ready to be thrown away, how can maybe the producers of those items take a part in helping with saying, if you're going to manufacture something a certain way, you're going to help with disposing of that and recycling it, reusing it. And so we are starting to get more involved in supporting some of those. And then our recycled content product procurement standards, working with the county departments to look at how we can improve there. With our partnerships, really what we're looking at here, again, we've talked about our diagram, and we're not at the center because we believe we need to be in the center and everybody needs to come to us, but it's just those are folks that we want to partner with. We've already started doing that, finding ways that we can support. If we don't have jurisdiction to dictate what a city does, how can we support efforts that they have going on to meet our goals and theirs? And so developing those relationships, and then also finding ways that we can partner with rural communities more to offer more services in our rural communities. The biggest one here is establishing most likely a solid waste advisory committee or the RRAC committee again, but we would like to form a committee that would be able to help guide our work and report to you on that work. With our programs, organics is a big one, and so we want to look at what we can do around the organics. That's everywhere from food waste to, yard debris, wood debris, even construction debris has those items. Multifamily recycling access, this is another very difficult area in terms of how you improve access for folks that live in apartment complexes and things like that to be able to have the same opportunities that residents do that own homes. Increase the reach of our master recycler program. We have a very active and engaged group there, and how we can increase their impact and ability to create change in their communities. And they are countywide, so they're pretty far reaching. And a big one is our household hazardous waste program. We're really trying to not only expand that program, but extend its outreach and education so that we can divert more of those hazardous materials. Revenue. One thing is the methane capture program is analyzing that, find out how we can capture more of that methane, both from an environmental standpoint as well as it can be used in a positive way. Ensure that our system benefit fee and our disposal costs are in line with the fees that we're charging, analyzing those, which is an ongoing thing that we do to ensure those are accurate. And then evaluate the option to import waste to Short Mountain from outside the county as both a revenue stream and using our resources. We're diverting more. That might become something that we would look to do. So lastly, these are just what kind of the big goals, what we're aiming to do, and I won't read over all of those. I'll keep this one up. But we need to make sure that our funding base stays solid and secure as it has in the last few years with the support of this group. And then we want to make sure that we're investing in a strong, diverse, sustainable regional economy. We want to take lead in reducing Linn County's environmental footprint. We can really be a leader in that, and it seems like a natural fit in our division, as well as the greenhouse gas impacts, both local and global environments, but knowing that we can have an impact in our own division and be a model for the county. And then seek opportunities to reduce costs to residents. And so, again, we've been seeking to do regular, smaller fee increases, but typically we've been keeping those a little bit lower than we've been getting hit with by folks, but really trying to be prudent in how this affects all residents in our community and their ability to access our system. So that's my presentation.
Okay, is there anyone that signed up for the public comment? Nope. Okay, so is there anyone here who has not signed up for the public comment that wishes to make public comment or testimony on this matter? Seeing none, hearing none, we will open and close the public hearing and turn to the board and see if there are any questions on these two items. Okay, please don't all talk at the same time. Commissioner Burney.
So a decade ago, there was a guy that introduced me to a concept that was new to me called the life cycle and the life cycle costs of a product, and he happens to be sitting with you. His name is Joshua Proudfoot. And I've had enough experiences to not only, is this a time to report back on the visit that we took that is actually consistent with the vision that Jeff laid out in his plan?
Go ahead.
It's okay? Okay. So I feel there is a serendipity at play here. I feel that with the capacity of a good company as a partner, with the staff now I've gotten to know intimately well, from Dan Hurley to Jeff to Angie, we don't know one another that well, but I'm getting those opportunities. There seems to be a new vision taking form. And I want to share with you how that took form for me a week and a half ago. And I think this is the right, Jeff, do you mind?
No, of course, go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So Jeff and Public Works organized a group to visit a variety of sorting facilities with sorters called MRFs, which just relate to sorting glass from plastics, from organic debris, from metals, and then recycling them. And we observed one that actually had a joint powers authority that you had referenced quickly, that was literally an agreement of municipalities from Palo Alto down to San Jose and west to Half Moon Bay, that all were transferring their garbage to this one central point. And they literally were under a mandate for zero waste. And at that facility, they were powering the entire facility was net neutral because it was operating off of the energy that the methane it was producing was creating. And the sponsors for that tour, the host, were decision makers from a company called Bulk Handling. The first time I heard of that group, again, was Mr. Proudfoot, but now I'm starting to know the players. And they are the fourth largest manufacturer of these sorting MRFs in the world. I've come across their products, their facilities at the Port of Los Angeles in my previous business. And they're located right here in Lane County. And they have a very strong interest in assisting and partnering with Lane County and others. Other people that you masterfully organized included decision makers from Sanapac, from Rexius, Bring Recycling, Pack Tech, and a pretty fabulous Lane County Public Works crew. We spent 2 full days with garbage. Stinky, dirty garbage. And I don't know if we have any video that I shared with the staff, Steve, but I took a lot of video of these different processes that this was all going through. The opportunity financially for Lane County to merge waste and materials management with recycling, with clean energy production, with incubating new technologies and businesses, making things out of recycled products and selling into traded sector markets, I think is huge. I'm just sharing with the board. I mean, I think it's huge, and it's all thanks to these people sitting in front of us. So let me give you a feel for how significant it is. One of the companies, Pack Tech, the owner of that company, who is a mechanical engineer and holds over 200 patents, has grown that over the last 12 years from a $5 million Lane County company to a $50 million a year company, expanded in Cottage Grove, hired 60 people in Cottage Grove, employs them, provides living wages. And he is someone who wants to support this, not just altruistically, but because he needs a supply of plastic to his specifications, because he has now created a national market for the utilization of recycled plastic in the injection molding that he does that we see a lot of places, including Costco. So I just wanted to share that I was the fortunate one. I got to see firsthand what the opportunity is. And everything I saw was 1,000% consistent with the plan that is being submitted today, and I just wanted to share that with the commissioners.
Anxious to hear that, Joe. Thanks.
Oh, thank
Sure,
you.
Mr.
You wanna
Ramirez
show us
was
something
just
here?
throwing these videos and pictures if you wanted to show those real quickly.
Well, if
Or
you press the
explain what
right
they are.
buttons. These are pictures of, we literally visited, I don't know how many sites, but and saw hundreds of thousands of tons of garbage. In this one, it's recycling paper and cardboard and selling it, I believe, to Asian markets. China no longer is taking it, but it's still being sold and how they're bundled. But please just go ahead. I want to get to the video so people can see some of these processes. And really, Jeff can explain it better than I, but this is just an insight into some of the facilities we visit and the kind of recycling that's occurring. Jeff, narrate away.
I think you're just showing there you can see the stream there that was brought to them, so that was from those collection trucks, and then they have the big equipment that will separate them. They have oftentimes big pickers that'll just grab, it's like a big claw, pick it up.
What was that material? It was blurry.
So it looked like that was a paper and cardboard, I think.
So it's sorted.
In that area, yeah,
It's already sorted.
yeah. Okay. Let's see what the second one is. It's hard to tell even what the materials, but yeah, you can see the sorting lines come off, and so, it's still, I think sometimes we envision what these systems are, and it was really beneficial for us to go there because it's still, you're talking about jobs, and so there's a lot of people on those lines. The different facilities had different ways they utilized how they found employees, and there were some interesting systems, like there were some that were recent inmates that were released that they then would have a job opportunity on these sorting lines. But you can see how even with the robotics and the scanners, optical scanners, I think there's still pretty, there's a lot of jobs that can be had, from being able to run these lines and sit in like in the engineering room to ensure everything's working okay, to, sitting there and actually sorting the materials out. I think their goal was 40 picks a minute or something that a person would be able to kind of take a contaminated item off. And so it was an interesting kind of machine and human interaction, if you will. Like Commissioner Burney was saying, we saw machines that were on a much larger scale for a much different population, and so it's helping us come back and get this group back together and meet regularly to talk about what would be possible here to scale it to Lane County. And so, and then we didn't show, it was a little smellier, the lines that did the organics, and, still pretty fascinating their ability to even take household trash bags coming out of the back of trucks and get organics out of those, and then use the organics to actually create methane, and they get all, basically it's I think a 17-day process to get it to a composted material that could be used as a daily cover. In a landfill, it takes about 40% of the volume out of that material by capturing that methane there. And then obviously you're catching it in 17 days, not years and years later in a natural landfill environment. So there's a lot of great potential, and it's a focal point of our plan is to look at how we can do that to really turn the corner on diversion.
Sorry to interrupt your presentation.
No, please, I was in, yeah.
So do other commissioners have any comments or further discussion before we entertain a motion to approve the ordinance, both ordinances? Commissioner Buck.
Say something quick. I really appreciate the whole trip that you went. I'm jealous that I wasn't able to attend.
Garbage trip.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what our family does over dinner as we talk about what great things we find in the garbage at different landfills. And really what it comes down to is how much product people throw away that's completely unnecessary in the first place, and reusable. And we can keep using those things and divert them from landfill in the first place. So I appreciate that, and I do also appreciate the direction of this new plan and support it very much.
What is the timeline for the recycling of household waste by people in Eugene, Springfield, the metropolitan areas, Santa Clara, Thurston, Cresswell, Veneta, kind of the major population center of Lane County? What is the timeline of getting use of all of that organic material? What's the timeline for that? Do we have a timeline?
Or meaning if we were to.
Like they do in Portland, where people take their household, wet, potato peelings and those kind of organics, and they don't throw them away. They're not allowed to put them in, at least is my understanding, you can't put them in your yard waste. You can't put them in your recycling. So you're gonna probably throw them away or compost them on your own property. But for people that live in apartment buildings, that's not going to happen. So when are we going to get that kind of reuse?
Are you talking about implementing organics?
Yeah.
Food composting?
Yeah.
Well, as far as we've heard from the city of Eugene, the only city in Lane County that is making moves in that direction, they are hoping to get that started by the end of this year or early next year. They went through a pilot program with 4 neighborhoods or communities, and that went well enough for them to feel like they can move forward with that.
Can we encourage that in the unincorporated areas, particularly where the economics would be favorable, such as Santa Clara or the unincorporated areas, or even Springfield and Coburg and Crestwell and other adjacent communities where it might be feasible to do that? Can we do that as opposed to waiting? Because we certainly have that authority in the unincorporated areas. So what is, are you saying our basic plan is to wait until Eugene requires it for Eugene, and then
I think that
we'll work with Eugene?
our plan was to, yes, wait, because that's not very long, but, what we hope to do with our partnership strategies is to work with all the other cities and encourage them to follow suit. It takes a certain amount of certain situations, having the hauler companies ready to do so, having the destination. We have Rexius, we have Lane Forest products. So that would work out. It's not a specific item articulated specifically, but our goal is to work with and encourage organics programs in all the cities and to do what we can to assist in that. Applying that and making some programs for the outside of cities would require us to have more oversight over the hauling collection. So one of our program strategies is to research and decide whether or not we can implement franchising or licensing or some sort of structure under which we can improve programs with the hauling community outside of incorporated cities.
Okay, and just a comment, I just really want to thank you for the advisory committee concept in there. I've been pushing for this for a number of years, and in fact, speaking of bulk handling systems, some of their executives were very strongly in favor of us doing this, so I'm glad my communication with them has been that they would like to be formally involved and be a member of this advisory committee. So I really hope we can build on the relationships that we already have here. And it is kind of unique that here we are, the flagship community for bulk handling systems, and we don't have anything going with them that I'm aware of. So that would be nice if that worked out. And maybe a start to that relationship is getting them on the advisory committee. So what's your timeline on the advisory committee?
My hope is to do it this fiscal year. And we have some interesting examples to look at. Metro has an example of how they've really been selective in the types of members they want on there. And so I think it's being strategic about, the diversity that we want on that committee. But we definitely, it's one of the first things to do in this master plan.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments before we get a motion to approve the 2 ordinances?
It would be,
Okay, go ahead.
no, I just would like the honor of moving to approve.
Go for it.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number PA 13.
No, you're moving to approve the second reading.
Am I?
Yeah.
Well, hell, I can't do that. Which one is it?
It's 11A and 11A, these 2 right here. Here we go.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
You're approving this ordinance and this ordinance. I'll bet you anything he moves to approve those 2 ordinances.
This is called anyone can be a commissioner. I'm sorry, these two.
This one?
I move to approve ordinance PA 1377 and ordinance number 1904 in the matter of amending Lane Code 16.4004.
Okay, is there a second to approve the two ordinances?
Second.
Okay, this being an ordinance, we'll have further discussion, and then we will have a vote, but the vote will be conducted by our, polling of the board will be conducted by our county administrator, as the charter requires that we poll each member individually for an ordinance. So is there further discussion on the two ordinances?
Are we passing both at the same time?
Yep, we are.
I was, did you want to say anything, Josh, or?
I just wanted to, I mean, the only thing I'd say is I'm delighted to see this written down and part of a plan. For the last decade, there have been so many great minds thinking and talking about this, and I like to see that it's coming into shape and written down and on its way forward.
Good. Thank you very much for your involvement in this, too, Mr. Proudfoot. Okay, so,
Pete?
yes, sir.
I just have one quick question. When did we start work on this master plan?
Before Dan.
Was it 5 years? Yeah.
Okay.
4 or 5 years ago?
Dan was just out of the academy.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of point out this didn't just happen. We've been working on this for a while, and I'm really happy to support it.
And also, in light of the controversy that we had on one of our solid waste plans a few years ago, this one has really come along, and the various perspectives represented by the people in our community have all come to at least recognize that this is a good step forward, so that's great. So, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, and I'd be out of place if I didn't talk about the thing I always talk about, and that is transfer of leachate. We're running in nasty trucks, up to 20 loads a day up the freeway, any one of which would cause a tremendous hazard if the truck tipped over. In fact, we did have one tip over at the site, at the plant, slow motion tip over not too long ago. Instead of a small sewer line, basically, a 3-inch sewer line, I think is what would handle it. We were doing 20 truckloads of nasty stuff a day, every day up the freeway, that people in cars with their families are following. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments by commissioners before we move to a vote? Okay, at this time, I will call on the county administrator to poll the board on the combined vote on the two ordinances.
Commissioner Bozovich,
Aye.
Commissioner Burney,
Aye.
Commissioner Buck,
Aye.
Commissioner Farr,
Aye.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Aye. What is the poll?
It passes 5-0, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you so much. So this matter having been subjected to public hearing, presentation, vote, both ordinances are adopted by a vote of 5-0. And thank you very much to all of the people present and not present, because I'm sure in a team effort of this size, there's a lot of people not present that really help, both inside and exterior to the county government. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is item 11B. And I get my materials here. And this is our third reading and continued public hearing on ordinance number 19-03 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 14 to make corrections required by the Land Use Board of Appeals, remand of ordinance 18-02, LUBA number 2018-093, and implement HB 2106, amending Lane Code 14.080, appeal procedures and Lane Code 14.100 LUBA remand procedures, amending Lane Code Chapter 16 to update Lane Code Chapter 14 references, amending Lane Code Chapter 14 to make other clarifications and corrections, and adopting a savings and severability clause, file number 509 PA 19-05317. Amber Bell, our interim planning supervisor, is here. I'm supposed to now point out that this is a public hearing. The hearing on this matter was open and testimony was received June 11, 2019, and the proposed ordinance has since been revised. Today's date is July 23, 2019. The proposed Lane Code amendments are subject to the applicable criteria identified in Lane Code 12.005, 12.050, and 16.252, sub 2. The order of proceedings for this hearing will be first a report by staff, followed by public testimony, then additional comments by staff. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to enable a response may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the public hearing, any participant may request the record be left open to provide an opportunity to present additional written evidence or arguments regarding the application. However, the board is not obligated to leave the record open. The board's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with ORS Chapter 197. At this time, I will call for disclosure of any commissioner abstentions due to conflicts of interest or bias. And as I mentioned in the last item, my understanding is that Sean Malone, on behalf of Land Watch Lane County, has written a letter to the board. I've not read that letter. I played no role in him writing the letter. Don't know what it's about. But suffice it to say, I have, in my legal business, have had business with Sean Malone, and not involving any land use matter or any matter in Lane County. But Mr. Malone and I do know each other and have worked together. I don't have any conflict of interest as it applies to this matter. Are there any other commissioners that want to make any disclosures at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is to call for any challenges to the board's qualifications to hear this matter. Are there any challenges to the board's qualifications to hear this matter? Seeing none, at this time, we will now hear the report from staff. After that, we will hear from public comment or public testimony. We will then have additional comments by staff, and then we will close the hearing unless we continue it, which I anticipate we will either continue it or have a third reading, and Ms. Bell can address that. So am I opening the hearing at this time yet, or what's the status of the, Ms. Bell? Do I open the hearing before you start talking, or? Yes, okay. At this time, then, we will be opening the public hearing. Hearing report from staff.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This ordinance was originally intended to address the Land Use Board of Appeals remand on Ordinance 1802. That was the Chapter 14 Code Modernization Project. And that was intended to address a couple of items in the remand having to do with timeline extensions and appeal submittal requirements. The board first opened the public hearing on June 11th. It was continued to today. And since that time, the ordinance has been substantially revised to implement House Bill 2106. That's the legislation that allows additional one-year timeline extensions for certain resource zone dwellings. It's been revised to amend the appeals process and eliminate the elect whether or not to hear procedure for board appeal. It has been amended for the LUBA remand process at 14-100 has been amended. We're also making some other minor amendments as part of this ordinance. We've added an emergency clause to the ordinance itself, and then we've added some updated references to Chapter 14 within the Chapter 16 resource zones. We've distributed public comments that had been received up to today to the commissioners. And we've also distributed an additional amendment to the draft at Lane Code 14090 in response to one of those comments. And I apologize because I believe I distributed that and it's actually a 2-page document. So I will give you both pages. Some of the commissioners may have page 1 and some may have page 2.
Thank you.
So House Bill 2106 that allows additional 1-year timeline extensions, that was enrolled, it was signed by the governor on June 20th, and it became effective on June 20th. It had an emergency clause. It allows an additional 1 year, or allows additional 1-year timeline extensions up to a maximum of 5 years total, provided that residential development rules have not changed, except for House Bill 2225, which becomes effective on January 1, 2020, and that includes some changes to the criteria for template dwellings in the forest zones. We researched the legislative history for this House bill, and it appears to be retroactive, meaning that we understand it would apply to dwelling permits that are issued before June 20th and after June 20th. And we found that in looking back to some of the discussion that the House had, Senate had on this matter. We have received public comments on this change. First, Landwatch Lane County commented at the last hearing that House Bill 2106 may not be mandatory and the full 5 years of extensions may not be required. The board could choose to limit those if they so choose. We researched this a little bit, and based on the legislative history of House Bill 2106, it does appear to not be a mandatory requirement. It appears to be something that counties may choose to allow. We've also received a few comments generally supporting these changes, and one comment, or a couple comments, requesting that we clarify that change in criteria in general or land use regulations in general does not prohibit 1-year timeline extensions. So the revisions that I've distributed today clarify that the standard that says additional criteria, criteria have not changed, that applies to non-resource dwelling permits, other application types, and we've clarified that for the resource zone dwellings, that the additional 1-year timeline extension option applies to. That's not subject to just generally additional criteria, or land use regulations or criteria have not changed. House Bill 2106 also includes as a standard that applicable land use regulation or applicable rules or land use regulation has not been amended, but the county may still choose to allow the additional 1-year timeline extensions if a rule or land use regulation is changed. In the draft, staff is not proposing to add this language for a few reasons. One, it would require that every time staff processes one of these additional 1-year timeline extensions, we would need to research changes in legislation, changes in local land use regulation, and that lends itself to a risk of procedural error if we miss something. And it also would involve quite a bit of research and time to identify those changes. Also considered in not recommending this language is that there is the maximum of 5 years. It is a policy call for the board to make, and so I did want to call this out. So the other change that we're proposing now as part of this ordinance is a change in the appeal process. This diagram shows our current appeal process, which involves generally once a type 2 decision is issued, that can be appealed to the hearings official or appealed to the director for reconsideration. At that point, if it goes to an appeals hearing, the hearings official would issue the decision. That can be appealed within 12 days to the board. An applicant can request or not request an on-the-record hearing, but in either event, it would be, that request would be subject to an evaluation of whether it meets the on-the-record criteria, and that would go to the board for a request not to hear if the applicant did not request an on-the-record hearing. That process takes about 30 days. It involves a substantial amount of staff time and work. It comes before the board on a consent calendar item, and as discussed with the board at the work session on this item on April 2nd, the board directed staff to eliminate this process with some criteria for planning director requests for board review. And so we've had time to go to the Planning Commission since the board's first reading on this ordinance, and have proposed a revised appeal process, and this diagram represents the changes that we're proposing. So under the proposed amendments, the type 3 decisions or hearings official decisions of type 2 appeals, that could become the final county decision within 12 days if it's not appealed. A hearings official decision could become final, and then it'd be subject to the timelines for appeals directly to Land Use Board of Appeals. Another option would be if it could meet the 150-day or applicable timelines, then a party or the planning director could request a reconsideration by the hearings official, or as another option, the director could request board review. And that would go to the board if there's matters of countywide significance or other criteria, which I'll discuss here in a moment. So as I mentioned, we took this to the Planning Commission on May 28th. They did recommend approval unanimously with some conceptual changes recommended. And so this is a statement that they made. They had concerns about any action by the board that would reduce the board's ability to interpret and decide local land use policy. And they suggested that we look at the current criteria for an on-the-record hearing and incorporate that into the draft. And so the proposed criteria that we've added for the planning director request is shown here, and this matches generally the on-the-record hearing criteria that's in the code today. And that involves, that would require that the director requests that the board conduct an on-the-record hearing or affirm the hearing's official decision only after finding that there's interpretation of county policies, issues of countywide significance, issues that will recur with frequency for which there's a need for policy guidance, if there's issues involving impacts to an inventory goal 5 resource, or the director or hearings official have recommended review. And again, this matches what we currently have in the code. We also are proposing, we've added to the ordinance amendments to Lane Code 14100. That's the procedures for processing a remand that we received from LUBA. Currently, the code requires that for a remand of a type 2 or 3 application, the hearings official will review the matter, and then it needs to go back through the board for adoption of a final decision through a few different options. We looked at state law, and it appears that's not in fact required for type 2 or 3 applications. And so we're proposing that if the decision originally was reviewed by the board, that it would come back before you and the board would make a final decision on that matter. Otherwise, the hearings official would review the remand and issue a decision. We're proposing some other minor amendments. We've added these to the ordinance. So those include increasing the number of pages from 5 to 20 that require identical paper or electronic copies, allowing the planning director to elevate a type 1 to a type 2 application if the planning director finds it's actually a land use decision, and if so, allowing an appeal of that application. We don't anticipate that circumstance would arise frequently, but it's an important process to call out. And then we've added that appeals require the signature of an appellant or in response to Landwatch Lane County's comments or their authorized representative. And then we've updated references to Chapter 14 in Lane Code 16.210 through 212. I will mention that it's come to our attention in the official version of Lane Code that's posted online, there are some references that instead of the reference being included in the code. For some reason, due to a document conversion error, there's zeros shown, and that's actually shown in the packet that's before you. We're going to be recommending a fourth reading, and in between now and then, staff will be working with county council to make those corrections. So that concludes my staff report. Because of the added, the changes that are recommended to the ordinance, we are recommending a fourth reading. So this would be constitute the first reading on some of those changes, and the fourth reading would actually be the second reading on those additional changes. And we're recommending that the board set that fourth reading for September 10th. Landwatch Lane County has requested that the board continue the hearing. We can discuss that after public comment a little more if you would like, but the board could either close the hearing today if you feel that there's been sufficient public comment on this item, or continue the hearing to September 10th.
Okay, so at this time, I will call for public testimony regarding the Lane Code Chapter 14 amendments. And here is the sign-up sheet. We have 2 people signed up, so please come to the microphone. When I call your name, you'll have 3 minutes to give your comments. Mike Evans, followed by Doug Wolf. Just tell us your name and tell us where you live. And then our distinguished vice chair will set the timer at 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Long list. My name is Mike Evans. I'm a land use consultant in Lane County, address 475 Oakdale Avenue in Springfield, Oregon, and I will be brief. I do support adoption of Ordinance 1903. Relative to the board participation in the appeals process, I was quite concerned about that initially due to losing the deference issue. I think the recommendation that the Planning Commission came up with, though, and that the staff incorporated is a good balance, and I think it's a good proposal, and I think should work pretty well and still retain deference on the most part. Second issue that's important, I think, most important, is the House Bill 2106 provisions that are incorporated in the current code. I'm fully in support of that. You may well know that it was Senator Lee Byer from Springfield who introduced the legislation into HB 2106. And we had hoped that it would reinstate the one-year extensions on an ongoing basis, but they limited it to just the 5. So we're pleased to get what we got and urge your adoption of what we were able to get. I had a concern about some of the language. I felt like there was a little bit of a conflict between certain provisions. So I sent Amber an email late last week and copied you folks with it. And in the meantime, Amber contacted me over the weekend, as a matter of fact, and wanted some clarification. And she's come up with some language, the language that she introduced today, which was a much better solution than what I had proposed. So I'm in support of that as well. So as I said, I think the reinstatement of at least some one-year timeline extensions are very important to a lot of the people out there, mostly the current holders of permits. A lot of people got permits. They got them with the belief that they could get ongoing one-year permits so they could get the money together to meet their conditions of approval and have their investment secured and that sort of thing. So it kind of cut them off at the knees when those extensions were removed. So reinstatement is very important to a lot of landowners out there. So I thank you very much if you'll support those. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Wolf, please come forward, give your name and where you live, and please take up to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Doug Wolf. I'm a forestry consultant. I've been a forestry consultant for 36 years here in Lane County. So naturally, I've come across a lot of these small woodland owners that have properties out there that'd be affected by the extensions. And so I'm here just to say I'm in support of giving these folks a little more extensions like you're recommending currently, and I hope that that goes on through and passes. So I appreciate it very much. I think it would help a lot of folks that have made investments in working towards their home sites or whatever through driveways and whatever, there's a lot of expense involved with that, wells and so forth. And so to cut them off with not an opportunity to complete that, in my view, would be kind of unfair. So I appreciate you guys taking a look at this and maybe doing that extension. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, at this time, it's my intent to leave the hearing record open so that when we have our continued public hearing, we can accept materials up through that public hearing, and particularly in light of all the changes that you spoke about today. So is there any objection to me doing that? Okay. So at this time, we will not close the public hearing. We'll allow additional materials to be submitted. And we will then, unless there's a further discussion by board, we will we'll have I'll entertain a motion to move the third reading and setting a fourth reading on September 10, 1:30 p.m. Harris Hall, to continue the hearing and begin deliberations. Is that a fair summary, Ms. Amber Bell, Ms. Bell? Yeah, okay, so we're going to continue the hearing. We're going to leave the record open. We are going to have the hearing on the 10th. We are going to then begin deliberations on the 10th. And we could possibly conclude the whole thing on the 10th.
I believe so.
Yes, I think that's right. Reflecting back to earlier conversations, there are, Ms. Bell mentioned the references in the draft code, which appear as zeros rather than what was intended, which is reference to other pieces in the code.
Okay.
16 point whatever, 13 or 14 point whatever. That it somehow got screwed up in the translation from the drafts in our office and how they appeared online. None of those references, though, are proposed for amendment here,
No.
and so that failure doesn't require us to go to yet another reading. So
Right.
all that is a long way of saying, yes, I think we're good with just one more reading.
Okay, so we're going to leave the record open. We're going to continue the hearing. We're going to have the continued hearing on the 10th, and we're going to begin deliberations, and we would be allowed, if we wish to do so, conclude deliberations and adopt the ordinance. Okay, so at that time, at this time, I'd like to, do you want to specify the time when materials are due or not, because we're just leaving it open and having a public hearing? So there won't be no LMD deadline.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So if I could get a motion to do that, we could discuss that motion and then vote.
Before we get to a motion to avoid needing a fifth reading, I'd like to ask a few questions about the current language,
Certainly.
because if we're going to, I want to make sure we're right now, and if we have to make some changes, we can maybe possibly make minor changes now, read those into the record, and not have a fifth reading. So I want to just delve a little bit into the, I read Mr. Evans' comments, and I had been looking at the language you originally proposed and all that, and I'm just getting your language now. So I think after rereading it, I get it. It's taken like 3 times to go back through there to make sure that it's actually not, the one-year extensions aren't reflecting the need to, that they're allowed, without having that language around criteria changing, because that's really not what the House bill says. House bill talks about amending the actual code, and then also says on rules and all that, we may still allow extensions anyhow. So I think what you've proposed kind of goes between what Mike was trying to do, which was put the House bill language right into our code, versus, having that piece about, any criteria changing would negate the ability to get an extension. So I think I'm okay there. The place I haven't quite gotten comfortable yet is in some of the comments from Land Watch, because one of them I don't really understand, and maybe you can enlighten me. What is Mr. Malone getting at about the effective date of post-acknowledgement plan amendments? I didn't see that in anything about effective dates in our proposed Chapter 14 change or something, but he spends the first paragraph or so talking about that we're proposing to change the effective date of post-acknowledgement plan amendments. Can you address that?
So I can try to address that. The comments from Mr. Malone don't reference a specific section in the draft. I am presuming that he is referencing the final decision and effective date of decision language in the Type 4 procedure requirements that is under 14030-1D III. There was some language there that stated if a Type 4 ordinance is appealed, the effective date will be delayed until the proceedings before the Land Use Board of Appeals or the appellate courts have been completed and any county remands have been concluded and a new effective date determined by an ordinance approving the application. Upon further review, that's not typically how we handle ordinances because we include a savings and severability clause. And so, for instance, the Chapter 13, 14, and 16 amendments, we're currently applying those except for those portions of the ordinances that are remanded by LUBA. And so this was kind of a clarification of our practice and how we.
And is that new language with this ordinance that would be implemented? That's what I was not quite following. Or is that something we did in the first Chapter 14 update?
It was with the first Chapter 14 update, we're proposing to delete that sentence.
Okay, so we added something, now we're proposing to delete it in this version. Okay, so that's what I wasn't tracking, whether he was making a reference back to the original Chapter 14, update, and reconfiguration into the new format and all that, or he was talking about this version, and I was not remembering the remand even addressing that section, and that's why I was completely confused about his references there.
I will add, if I may, that we go on to clarify that ordinances may be appealed in accordance with ORS Chapter 197. And so we believe that the appeal period that he's referencing is still afforded by the Chapter 14 provisions.
Great. So we think we're okay as far as the effective date of the post-acknowledgement plan amendments. That gets down to the issue he has with us being able to appeal our own decisions, the planning director being able to appeal to the board a hearings official decision, and the issue of this body, basically, this government appealing our own government's decisions, and whether there's an issue there. This is kind of part of why I like the elect to hear process and not elect to hear process. That doesn't put us appealing ourselves as in that way. So I'm kind of, how do you reconcile his issue with that and some of the references he's made to other court decisions around that's really not a permissible activity, and we're setting up a process of us appealing ourselves?
I'll jump in if I can, Commissioner Bozovich. With respect to the issue you just raised on the effective date language, the previous issue, I'll take a look at that between now and the hearing and give you advice as to whether I think we need to make any changes to comply with the issues he's raised. But beyond that, to the issue you were just speaking of, I disagree with Mr. Malone that the planning director deciding to elevate a decision up to the board, as we proposed, constitutes an appeal for which the county would be appealing itself. It's really just part and parcel of getting to a final county decision is all. And so I don't view it as a county, as I say, the county appealing itself is just another step toward getting to the final county decision. There isn't a decision to appeal until either the hearings official decision has run its course or this board has spoken.
And Amber, if you don't mind rolling back to that revised process real quick, that slide. There, thanks. So hearings officials, so the appeal reconsideration, that's the applicant's ability to request an appeal of reconsideration that's on the left, and the director request board review is about if he feels there's something of county significance or where local code might need to have that, the deference where he, he or she, the planning director, basically says, I want the board to affirm this decision so that we get deference. That's not quite the same thing as an appeal. I think I kind of agree with you there. That's just a request for the board to declare the similar to our current process of elect not to hear. It's just a matter of making sure that in those cases, is there any ability for someone to ask the planning director to make that request to the board? Because it may not, I don't know how many land use decisions come out of the hearings official a year, but quite often the attorneys that are involved and land use consultants that are involved in a decision know when deference may be important in an appeals process. Can they request the planning director to request the board to, is there any place for that to take place?
I don't think there's a formal process in the code where you can make that request. I think there's always going to be these sort of informal lobbying from the applicant or the representative
Or even
that
the
you should consider asking the board to review this because, but it's not, there's nothing like that written into the code. Right?
Yeah, I just, you're leaving that decision about when deference is important to a single person. And be good that there's some outside influence on that, but I guess that we'll just leave that as an informal process. So you believe we've handled the issue around with this process, that we're really not appealing ourselves. We're just making a request for the board to declare final action so we can get deference on the local portions of our code.
Yes, and if I may add to that, one of the distinctions, as I understand, in the Multnomah County v. Multnomah County case is that Multnomah County included a provision that said the county basically had party status to appeal a hearings official decision directly to LUBA, and we're not proposing that here.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, because if there needed to be a tweak to language, I wanted to try and do that now, rather than wait till, the couple weeks from now when we're trying to take final action, then we have to go through another fifth reading and possibly hold hearings open and everything else. So I was trying to thank you for allowing me to ask those questions so I could be sure that we didn't miss something here. I appreciate that you guys listened to the Planning Commission and made those changes, because I've been really concerned about the elimination of the elect not to hear process, specifically over that deference issue. And this allows that to be brought back in, and I think that was a great compromise. And you guys figured out how to stick it back in without making it, having people have to pay another $250, to get past that step in the process to get the LUBA. So I really appreciate the way you guys kind of threaded the needle and got us there. So I think we've addressed the various comments that have come in. And I think this process kind of addresses Mr. Close's concerns to go back to the elect not to hear, because we do now have a process with the planning director's request for board to take final action to get that deference. So I'm going to support the motion. And did you give us a date for the follow-up hearing?
September 10.
September 10th? So if you would like, I can make a motion then.
Very good. Yep.
So I'd like to move approval of the third reading and continue the public hearing and setting a fourth reading and continue public hearing for ordinance number 1903 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 14 to September 10th at a 1:30 time certain.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bozevich, seconded by Commissioner Burney, to move the third reading instead of fourth reading and public hearing on September 10, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. at Harris Hall. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The vote is 5-0, all commissioners voting in the affirmative, and the motion is adopted. And we will see you back here on September 10 for the public hearing and continued deliberation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are now down to county commissioner announcements. Do any commissioners have any announcements they wish to make? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is directed at Mr. Mokrahysky. I just want to publicly thank you for the process that you're moving forward regarding using currently empty county facilities. We have a lot of square footage that is dry and unused at this current time, the Armory being one of those properties, the unused pod at Surview Youth Campus being another one of the properties, and that you have initiated processes for both items, and you are moving forward toward a potential solution for us, paying for empty space, basically, trying to find the highest and best use, whether it be a permanent use or a temporary use of those facilities. I want to thank you for doing that. I had a chance to meet with some people this morning who are interested in youth facilities and additional youth services at the Surview. You are aware of that. You're moving forward with staff, and a number of steps have been made in that process. Thank you, Mr. Mokrahysky, for moving that forward.
Any further announcements? Commissioner Burney.
I would also be interested in the empty cafeteria space. What's happening there? I would just like to share that it has been an active weekend in Springfield, Oregon. Noche Cultural last Friday afternoon and evening in 85-degree weather. Had a celebration featuring music, games, education material, and food regarding the Hispanic culture and Hispanic community in Springfield. Hundreds upon hundreds of people were there. While there, I learned that Adolescent and Family Services, located at Centro Latino Americano and Oregon Social Learning Center, is providing free substance abuse services to teenagers in Lane County through a grant that they have. And I wanted to mention that because they're having a hard time or challenging time getting that word out. The Springfield Chamber and the Springfield Renaissance Development Corporation hosted a block party in downtown Springfield the same evening, in which there were hundreds, if not well over 1,000 people celebrating 20 new businesses that opened up in downtown Springfield over the last year. It was amazing. And the Springfield Public House convened its first annual seafood festival, and I was at all three. I'm tired. And that's all I wanted to announce, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other commissioner announcements? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to an item. We kind of packed in 4 items into original 12B. I'd like to break that down by having first a review of our 2 sheets that were passed out. Were 2 sheets passed out or just 1? 2, okay. The first one, so anyway, just as a roadmap of what we're doing here, we're going to go over these 2 sheets of paper, then we're going to go to new agenda team requests, then we're going to go to new work session requests. There's the material that was posted on the internet in preparation for today's meeting are basically the 2 items. One is the one is the yellow, red, and green colored sheet, and that is our agenda team requests. These are on the internet, available to the public. And then the other one is called the future agenda items, and that is updated weekly on Mondays, and that is also posted on the internet. So what I'd like to do is to take the items on the sheet called agenda team requests, which is not written on your sheet as agenda team requests, but it's the one with the big red bar in the upper left-hand corner. And basically, everything with the green is something that is scheduled, is being worked on, and is in process, and is, got a date, and it's coming in. Everything with red and yellow are unknowns, and that's what the agenda team wants to do, is to really focus on the red and yellow items to modify them, get rid of them, improve them, and give board direction on whether we're going to pursue those. So the bulk of what we have here is ongoing work, it's scheduled, it's moving, and I'd really like to focus, at least until we finish all the red and yellow items, I'd like to finish all the red and yellow items and so the first one is, we've got yeah, go ahead.
Could we deal with the order around waiving attorney-client privilege, so our...
Oh, did that get distributed, or?
Yeah, and it's on our agenda.
okay.
It's already been posted to our agenda as item 12A.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. Let's,
So our
no,
our
thank
attorney
you.
can-
I just, I'm intent on getting through this list, and I'm sorry, I didn't even see.
As I understand it, Ms. Jones did an amended agenda.
Yeah, it's already been posted online and everything.
What is the amended number for
It's
the?
1907-2311 is the order. and it's
1907,
And it's agenda item 12A,
So it's 19-07,
2311.
okay, very good, 2311. Okay, very good. So what I meant was, what's the agenda number? Is it under?
12A.
12A, okay. So let's go to the real 12A, which is in the matter of waiving attorney-client privilege in the matter of ORS 294-100. This is order number 19-07-23-11. Just to introduce this, the board held an executive session and discussed a memorandum that the county council had written. We then heard an announcement in today's public meeting from County Council Dingle regarding the waiver of the attorney-client privilege. The board wanted to make it clear what we're waiving and what we're not waiving. So a board order has been presented. That's the board order 19-07-23-11 that we have in front of us. It has been posted to our public agenda. And at this time, I'll call on Commissioner Bozovich to make a motion to approve the order as presented.
So I'll move approval of order number 1907-2311 in the matter of waiving attorney-client privilege in the matter of ORS 294.100.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bozovich, seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the order. Any further discussion on the part of the board?
Chair Sorensen, if I may, I wanted to make one point really clear. This order only waives attorney-client privilege as to the written materials, or the opinion in the memorandum, not the conversations that were had in executive session between council and the board.
Yeah, you just anticipated my question, so thank you very much.
It's actually in the order, it says that.
Okay, and then will the materials be released? How are the materials released once the board votes on the order?
Well, Chair Sorensen and board members, I talked to Ms. Jones. She's given me some dates. I didn't know if you wanted, how you wanted to handle that. She's got two potential dates for the hearing, or for the work session. And then we also, I think the board or the agenda team, somebody needs to decide what the format or the parameters are around that work session. And then once that happens, they get posted just like.
Well, may I make a suggestion that you put it on the county council's website when the board approves this order? That way, the people that are interested in the work session, and the joint work session, they can begin reviewing the materials that have been submitted.
I'll do that, and then we'll post it as, that will be also posted to the agenda.
When we get to that, yeah. Thank you very much. And that way, Commissioner Burney, who received that email and passed it along, that the public can be informed that it's all available on the internet. Okay, any further discussion regarding the motion as made and seconded? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Vote is 5-0, all commissioners voting in the affirmative, and the order is approved and even signed. So thank you very much to staff for getting that done today, and thank you for agreeing to post the materials on the county council website.
I won't because. I
Well,
like the tech
thank
ones.
you for asking
Someone will by
someone
5
to
o'clock today.
post it on the county council website. And thanks, Commissioner Bozovich, for getting me out of my head down on the grindstone so we can move to the other items on commissioner business. And so I'll go back to what I was talking about. You've got in front of you, commissioners, you've got the future agenda items, and you have the agenda team requests. And I'd like to focus on the red and yellow, first of all, because that'll help the board and staff and agenda team work on some of the scheduling issues. Commissioner
Brief comment.
Buck.
When we're focusing on red and yellow, we also heard that there are several items in green, and we do have staff that are currently working on these items. If there's some reason somebody suggests that we don't need to be working on these items, that would be good to know right away, so staff doesn't continue
Yep.
spending their time on
Yep.
those. So
I agree, and all I was trying to do is to get
Yeah.
the yellow and red items out of the way first, then
Okay.
jump to what we can do with any of the other items. So thank you for that contribution. So first up, we have the Commissioner Burney would like to have a work session with our partners to discuss regional economic development. Commissioner Burney said he would come back with further direction on this assignment at a later date. Comment, this assignment is on hold until after June 2019. What would you like to do, Commissioner? What's your suggestion?
Oh, you don't want the truth.
You can't handle the
Yeah.
truth.
I'm sorry. On the one hand, these were made during Commissioner Buck's and my first week, I think.
Yep.
And we were kind of figuring things out. So let me just say on this one, I think this is what has occurred, and this is what I propose we do. What has occurred was the county lost its manager of economic development, whom I was meeting with Mr. Mokraheisky on the subject. We've continued our meetings. There are some opportunities for really focusing on regional, including rural, local economic development priorities, and correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but it's starting to get kind of tangible. So my recommendation is that you allow me to continue talking with staff, and within a couple of months, I think we'll have something tangible so we can actually discuss a concrete work session. I don't want to waste the board's time until then, though. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, so
I could get into more granularly, but I don't think we want to do
what's
that.
the timing on finding a new economic development director?
We're not waiting on that.
I don't have a
we're not.
specific date for that, but I would say, probably after Labor Day, we could do a work session. We
Thank you.
talked to Commissioner Burney
Okay.
last week about that. So if we want to sort of flag September-ish as a time to bring this item back, we
Okay.
can do that.
All right, so let's just say, September 1 plus. Is that okay?
Yes, and if I may, I just wanted to say, I know you want to just kind of go down, but the changes have enabled, Steve, correct me, because I think I'm paraphrasing you as well, has enabled the county to take a pause, rethink approach, which will help define the kind of skill sets it will be looking for in replacing that position. And it's been delightful to participate in that process.
Okay, Commissioner Farr.
Just so briefly, and I'm really pleased that Commissioner Burney's brought this forward as a priority item, but because this is something that the board, as long as I've been on the board, we've been highly interested in economic development, looking at new opportunities as you are presenting them, as you're bringing them forward. I'm excited about that. We're all interested in economic development. We're all interested in jobs. We're all interested in making certain that Lane County is as viable economically as possible. So this is very timely. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess the modification will be, we'll strike out Sarah Means' name. We'll write in, who's the interim? Austin. And we'll write in his name, and we'll say September 1 plus. Okay. That's it for page 1. We will come back to a commissioner, so we will come back to page 1 on the green after we finish the reds and yellows. Next up will be Commissioner Burney will work with El Rapa Board to find out a possible joint meeting, public hearing with El Rapa Board and our board. What is the status of that?
I was directed to do that by the current chair. And I did, and I didn't quite articulate correctly the reason for that. So I know that, Steve, didn't you get a call and try and determine what the reason for having that joint meeting would be? And it, to my knowledge, that's where I left it. I left it with staff.
Do we need to do that?
I don't feel we need to do that, but I don't know if the board feels we need to. I will follow up on their
No,
behalf.
the purpose of this is to decide whether at the time we put something on there and then time passes, people change, people leave their jobs.
I would suggest we delete that then.
Okay. And unless I hear otherwise, that assignment will be considered done. Okay, next up, we have, a request was made to have staff analyze the needs and costs related to video conferencing capabilities in Harris Hall for board meetings.
So we had an update in the technology committee yesterday, and so there'll be an update on this, and it will be just a little bit longer. They're exploring, they've identified some ideas that they're exploring, and we'll get back to the technology committee.
Ms. Jones is here. What is the reason you have this as yellow? Just because it's past the date?
No, yellow typically means I don't, green, anything that's green, if you look next to it, that is the date it's coming back to the board meeting. When it's yellow, it has a TBD. It means we don't have an assigned date for it to come back
Okay.
yet, but we're still working on it.
Okay.
So I know Mike Finch and myself and Metro have been working on the video conferencing. So the yellow ones don't necessarily mean anything bad. It just means we
No.
don't have a board
No.
date
Okay.
assigned for it. So
That's fine to leave it as yellow because we
yeah,
just
that's,
don't have a
I
date.
need to until we.
Okay, next up, request was made to have Alex Kyler and staff return to the board for a work session with a review of AOCC participation. Give us a balanced understanding of the benefits and drawbacks. What are the pros and cons? Board would like this to return no later than December 18. So are we going to, following normal protocol, that would be scheduled unless we say, no, we don't want to do that, or that should be modified, or whatever?
Correct. When Mr. Kyler, I know he is working on putting something together, and he'll work with me to find a date to bring.
Now, we've had some public comment saying, well, hey, what about the people that don't think that we should be involved with the organization? That's not part of this request.
No, I believe this assignment was to just have staff report back. It was made by Commissioner Farr, and it wasn't a
Okay.
pros and cons. It was an analysis by Mr. Kyler.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Kyler's giving us the pros and cons,
Correct.
not the group,
Right.
not the opponents of the group. Okay?
My understanding on that one, since it's my request, is that December 18th is a deadline. We're stepping back from December 18th to determine when the actual work sessions will be scheduled. Commissioner Burney, during the discussion, had some comments regarding interim progress reports, I guess basically is what you're asking for, as we get closer to the December 18th timeframe.
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
we'll have a,
I'm satisfied that
we'll have a
we're
work session
on
prior
target
to
with this.
December 18th.
Correct.
I'm satisfied we're on target with this.
Go ahead.
I was informed by Mr. Kyler that he would have wanted to give us that information, but he was absolutely busy with session. So my understanding is that that's being planned as we speak, and it may be that there are additional hearings or understandings that we're going to want, but I agree with Commissioner Farr, and when we can, we ought to get on with it.
We actually did, Mr. Kyler, and Mr. Kyler prepared a memo that was presented to the board during the budget process that outlined what staff viewed as, you know, and this was along with all the other committees or associations that that the county belongs to, what the benefits of membership to that were. So some of that information has already been provided, but I agree, Commissioner Farr's, I think, comment was to have a discussion sort of mid-year to review how has this gone and what have the impacts been. So that would be our intent, is to return back with that sort of status update.
And just for a process kind of update for you, what I do whenever these assignments are made is I send them to the staff the day they're made. And I typically follow up every couple weeks to try to get a date established. And once a date's established, it'll change to green and be on the future agendas.
Okay.
list, so.
I'm going to make one request on this AOCC thing. What is the downside of having people who are not in favor of AOCC participation? What's the downside of that? I'm going to ask that.
I believe this assignment was made by Commissioner Farr so that we could actually hear what staff thinks currently. We didn't, you know, we've had a lot of emails on pros and cons, and I believe Commissioner Farr requested this specifically just from staff.
Okay.
I'll let him elaborate
All right.
on that.
That's correct. It was, we have not had a staff presentation. We've had a great deal of both written and public testimony.
Okay, that then, now we could schedule that right away though, for December, right? We could schedule it. It could move from the yellow to the green.
Yeah, it's just when Mr. Kyler's ready.
Right,
with the
okay.
information, and as soon as he is, we'll set a date, and like I said, you'll see it on future agendas. It could be anytime between now and December 18th.
Okay, very good. Okay, next up is, request was made to have Alex Kyler, legal, staff from PMP, staff from PSCC work together to draft the letter for the board. Didn't we already do that letter? I think we already did that letter. Yeah, we did do that letter. We sent the letter.
We have not sent that letter yet, I don't believe.
I thought we sent that letter.
It's in review, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I will double check that.
All right, so you'll check on that one. I thought we had approved that letter.
Won't that just come to a consent calendar item?
I think that's how it was approved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be, but I don't,
I think there's still some analysis being done about the opt-out trigger.
Okay.
It was active.
Well, you'll report back on that.
I will.
And put it in there. Okay, so next up, request to staff to work with Mr. Eisenbach. By the way, he's Eysenbach. Mr. Eisenbach. So we'll have, let's see, staff was, request was made to have staff work with Mr. Eisenbach to discuss his proposal for a housing bond. So HHS, budget, finance, work together with Better Housing Together to look into what this proposal actually is, and should Lane County be working further on this option. So Steve Manella, I believe, is working on this, and others. No date. Do we have any updates since this was written?
I believe I saw some emails today that they're getting together and meeting more on this very soon, but
Okay.
no
Okay,
proposed
but
date for this.
certainly in progress.
It is.
Have HR return to board with options to process, as well as timelines and schedule terms with sequencing contract dates and review dates for board reports, the 3 board employees.
And Alana is working on that, just no date yet.
She interviewed me, as she interviewed all the rest of the commissioners. Monday?
I haven't met with her yet.
You met with her, Commissioner Farr? Okay, so I'll ask Ms. Holmes to contact Commissioner Farr so they can set up a time.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Next up, a request is made to have a work session to discuss establishing a 15-hour minimum wage for Lane County employees. Diana sent an email to Alana Holmes on 7/10. What do you think is a timeline there? Unknown.
Again, she's in the middle of working on this and doing some analysis.
Yep.
And
Okay.
I do know she's aware of.
These are all ongoing things.
They're ongoing,
Yep.
and once they kind of nail down their information, they'll start setting a date for it. to
Commissioner Farr requested agenda team review the kindness letter that was sent by Bruce Aubel. He would like the board to either send a letter or have a work session. His preference was work session. He will defer to the decision of the agenda team. Didn't we send a letter on that?
Yes, this is a combined assignment. The next sentence says the assignment was updated on
6/11.
6/11 to request that we contact Mr. Abel
Okay, Aubel.
and set up a work session on
Dr.
kindness.
Abel, yeah.
Kindness.
Okay, so what will that work session be? Mr. Aubel will be talking to us about
I can elaborate.
the kindness movement.
The cities of Eugene and Springfield are becoming kindness cities. It's all a lot of it is in preparation for the 2021 games and just a general interpretation throughout the cities of kindness. Now that sounds like a pretty trite issue, but the kindness campaign is really intent. There's a great many bullet points as to what the benefits of it are. And that's what we would discuss during a work session. There is a large event at the Shed scheduled for November 3rd, which will involve the cities and hopefully the county. It's certainly involving the county because 2 of our doctors will be making presentations in that event. So I think this is something that we should take up in the very near future to discuss how we can participate, if only by doing what 4J did, which is provide a letter supporting the cities of Eugene and Springfield. I think we can go further than that. So, Ms. Jones, I think Dr. Abel was maybe waiting to be contacted by you.
Right, I have his information to contact and set up a time for him to have, it sounded like he had kind of a set format for a work session that, and we did send out a letter. We did send out a kindness letter to, it was on consent calendar a few weeks ago, maybe to Mr. Abel. It was written by Ms. Ashbridge.
Okay, I'll check with him. I talked to him just
Incidentally,
yesterday.
at the time we have that work session, I'll ask him about the happiness movement. The city of Victoria, British Columbia, has been promoting happiness as a
Two very, very different things.
kindness and happiness are never, the happiness people aren't kind, and the kindness people apparently are not that happy, so I
And
really,
that's the danger that we have with this, is that we kind of take it tritely, but
Well,
it really is something that can be a
I think
significant
the
effect. Dr.
happiness-
Abel was formerly our chief behavioral health director for the county for many, many years, and he takes it very seriously.
very good. We will set up that work session. Okay, so having done all of the yellow and red items,
There are 2 more.
two more yellow items. So let's see, request was made to remove Goal 5 aggregate resources from Metro Plan and Comp Plan and make them available for other resources. The board would like staff to send them an email discussing the possibility of this assignment.
And that was assigned to Mr. Miller, and I do know he's working on it, and he will send out an email
Okay?
when it's ready.
And staff to return to board with an update on work session to review results of the courthouse bond measure. Diana sent email to Steve Mokrahysky and asked which staff to include.
And I've talked to Mr. Mokrahysky about it too, and we're still working through the details of that
Okay.
item as well.
It'd be good to get a report on how people perceived the whole project.
We've been gathering information about that, and we did conduct a survey, and after election survey, so we have some of that information we're pulling together along with mapping the vote, so actually doing some visual mapping of the county regarding where we received X percent plus or minus in the county, and so we want to pull all that information together, and then we'll bring it back to the board. So I'm thinking probably late August to probably into September, since we only have 2 meetings in August.
Okay, very good. Now, Commissioner Buck, you made a great suggestion that we also take a look at any green items, having gone through all the red and yellow items and gotten more update on those. What suggestions do you have on the green items?
Well, my suggestion is just to have everybody look at it, and if there's something that's done, email Diana about it, but for the most part, these are calendared to be on our upcoming meetings. I don't anticipate much coming off, but if you do see something,
And actually, a lot of them, a couple will fall off today, and it looks bigger than it is. A couple of them are coming back on the 30th and 31st, and then we're just kind of in August, a couple, so it is cleaning up.
So these are the ones that are all scheduled and they're ready to go, and they're just waiting for the time to
be presented or.
present, yeah.
And the ones on the 23rd, Mr. Chair, I think you dispatched today.
Yep.
matter of fact.
Yes.
Yep.
Those assignments will be not closed, they'll be modified because we've now agreed we're going to do a work session, so they'll roll to a different date when we determine the date for the work session.
Yep. Okay. Well, very good. And now the posted future agenda items are really just the summary of the items that are currently scheduled.
Yes.
So.
How we manage your workload.
Right, right. And so really, we've been over everything on this sheet.
Well, on the future agenda list, it also incorporates items that staff calls and says, for example, they're going to have a hearing or a remand or something. Those are not agenda team requests, so they're not on here. but
Gotcha.
They are on.
But they are on the future
Yes.
agenda. Very
Yes, we
good.
coordinate. those
Okay, and
items.
for, just as an example, let's see here,
I believe, for example.
the board requested on 7/30, no, not 7/30, 3/19, 2018, the board requested that H&H return with a work plan on youth marijuana. That's on next week's agenda,
Exactly.
for example.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. And I guess it's on the future agenda item, there it is, further discussion on priorities related to marijuana. Okay, good. So that, you've pretty much seen what the board requested here, but this is what board and staff is requested and is going on the calendar.
Right, and it helps us manage, are we going to go to a Wednesday meeting, or do we need to
Yep.
potentially not do a hearing on a certain day because we've
Yep.
already got too many,
Yep.
those kind of things.
Okay, so just universally, are there any comments, questions, improvements? Yes, sir.
Just one comment on the fourth item down there about the work session, about changes in the county code to clarify when reviews happen in initiative process. We kind of dealt with, the one above, which was, or a couple above about legalities and our liabilities. But this was more about, do we have the ability, and we'd need to hear from legal counsel about this, to write county code. We've got a couple court decisions that say, as the statutes currently stand, they're silent on when you do that review. So we, as a court, have determined that you review for separate vote after you have certified that there are enough signatures, which I think is really bad, because then you make people go out and collect a whole bunch of signatures, and they may not be able to get what it is on the ballot. My request was, can we write a local ordinance that says we are going to do separate vote review when you turn the initiative in, before you start collecting signatures, so when you finish collecting signatures, it will actually be able to go on the ballot. That assignment has not been completed. I mean, it's got today's date on it, but it's not done unless I haven't seen a memo, I haven't seen anything that says that's not legal, you just can't do it. We've had no discussion around amending our code.
Commissioner Bozevich, I did speak to County Counsel Dingle regarding that, and those three items that have the 7/23 dates on them, he was planning on addressing all of them in the work session, so they're kind of flowing together.
Okay,
Okay?
so those are still yet to come.
Yes, yes.
I just want to make sure that it just.
Yeah, those three items, according to County Council Dingle, are all going to be addressed in the work
Yeah,
session.
'cause it seems like we dealt with the first one there about the executive session and conflicts, and then we actually waived our attorney-client privilege a
Right.
few minutes ago, so, and put that memo on out in public, so. I just want to make sure it was clear that we hadn't quite finished
Right.
what I was requesting there, which was to look at an actual ordinance to change our code to clarify, state statute silent, county code, because we're a home rule county, can actually talk about that process.
Right, and I
Well,
will
that-
confirm with County Council.
The third item, a request was made to have county council together with the risk manager bring an item back to the board which gives an overview regarding the personal financial liability of commissioners. In my view, we haven't done that at all.
I believe you did that in executive session.
Under number 2, kind of.
Okay.
Again,
Today we did that under number 723? We did that? No, we didn't.
I believe you did that under an executive session on July 9th or the week before that. But again, I'm going on what
Well,
Mr.
I'm just
Dingle said.
agreeing with Commissioner Bozovich that we did not complete that.
No, all three of them, according to Steve Dingle, the three items kind of all tie together.
Okay,
So he's addressing them all together in executive sessions and in a work session
okay,
when you determine the date for that.
all right. Commissioner Farr.
Ever so briefly, Chair Sorensen, I'd like to elevate and compliment you on the fact that you've done a very judicious job of moving things to the consent calendar, things that didn't necessarily demand a broader discussion, things that we may have had a broader discussion of in the past, while still allowing things to be pulled from the consent calendar should any one of us wish to do it. That allows us to spend more time on substantive discussion without feeling that we're pressed for time on issues that really do demand substantive discussion. So, well done.
Appreciate the thanks, but it all goes to Commissioner Buck. She's the one that's been pushing it away there. Good.
Trying to go faster.
All right, so we're done with this part of the meeting. I would like to now turn to future agenda team requests, and not to be confused with work session requests. So we're kind of breaking that up to the new agenda team requests. I know, Commissioner Buck, you mentioned a few. I'm going to follow up on some suggestions Mr. Mokrohysky made. So why don't we turn to you first, and then I'll go down the ones I heard from Mr. Mokrohysky.
I had three, one of which I didn't speak to yet, but I want to go back to the two that I mentioned earlier in the day. Traveling County wanted to do a presentation on the Lane County Cycling Project, and wanted to do a presentation, maybe 15 minutes or so, and just to update us on their cycling project. And if there wasn't necessarily everybody that was interested in listening to that, then they could do that individually with commissioners that are interested. So I did say that I would present it and see what everybody thought about that.
I'm in favor of spending up to 15 minutes on that.
The additional thing I wanted to mention.
Well, let's see if the board wants to do the cycle.
Right, but I want to just state one more thing, which is in next week's calendar, we have a little space in the afternoon to do some shorter presentations. If we want to utilize that date, we'd have to coordinate with them. If they want that date, it may not work out, but we do have a little bit of space in the afternoon.
Okay, I think we should spend up to 15 minutes on that.
I agree, and as the rep to the Lane County Board, there are a number of things that come up like that from time to time that they would like to add. You know, we have once a year we have a presentation from them, and time goes so quickly in that presentation that we don't get to cover some of the really kind of happy things, just like the City of Victoria, happy things that they do that really increase the both the livability and the appeal of Lane County. So this is right up that alley, so, yes.
Okay, are there three commissioners that want to spend that time?
Three have already.
At least three, okay. So that's done. Okay, Commissioner Buck, your next item.
The next item was from the U.S. Forest Service. They came to me last week with an idea, which I suggested we needed to discuss at the board level prior to going forward. And that's specifically a request to present Good Neighbor Authority, or GNA, opportunities/impacts to the board on specifically ONC controverted lands, which specifically means that the BLM has title, but the U.S. Forest Service manages them. They also had a 15-minute presentation, but there may be additional time for discussion after that, which I would anticipate. But this is actually fairly timely for them. They want to know one way or the other fairly soon, and this could fit in our next week's afternoon schedule.
I learned a little bit about this in the agenda team meeting today, and from what I learned, I think it would be good for us to have the presentation by the Forest Service on the Good Neighbor Authority. I'm sure we'll have questions about it, but I think it's a good idea. It involves land in Lane County.
Yep, and there's specific pros and cons
Yep.
that we need to discuss.
Okay. Are there three commissioners up for that?
I'm willing to discuss it, but the concept of having the state pick up the cost of a federal program because they haven't adequately staffed it and have spent the money through fire or borrowing galls me to some extent. So I'm willing to talk about it.
Is the state involved in this?
Yes, that's who pays for the Good Neighbor.
okay.
That's who pays they've been loaning staff to the Forest Service to delineate sales so they can get them done, because the Forest Service has used up all their money for doing that staffing, fighting fires that they don't do enough initial attack on in the first place. But there's a whole, whole long story behind that. But basically, this is the state picking up costs for the Forest Service because the Forest Service is doing a horrible job of managing their budget.
Well, very good. I just want to say I am for good neighborly activity. Okay, so we'll do both of those, and you'll work with Ms. Jones and the people on the travel lane bicycling thing and the Forest Service on the Good Neighbor Authority. Okay, did you have any others before I?
have one other item that was new. We did get an email from Diana regarding different categories of assistance for commissioners, and we each get to pick what we'd like to do. I want to express that the person that I envision to be helping me kind of falls in between 520 hours and the 1,040 hours, which is specifically temp, 1,040 hour maximum per fiscal year, that particular category. And there is board action, a modest amount of board action to make sure that the definition is written correctly, and perhaps there's some more language in here that we can all read. But for me, that is what I would like to do. Otherwise, if we get somebody for up to 520 hours maximum, that is a little over half of our individual allocations, and I want to be able to maximize that allocation as much as possible. So I would like to see if there are 3 head nods to make the attachment C to that email effective and be presented as a board order for next week's agenda. Otherwise, there will be a postponement into our August sessions and a delay in which we can hire these folks. And if other commissioners are interested in having the same change, depending on the amount of help that you want, we can combine that effort for the board order for next week if there are enough head nods.
could you give us more explanation of how you would summarize this board agenda team request?
If I,
Yes, please.
so there was an existing job description for a commissioner assistant, but when we went back and looked at that, we realized that it did not contain language that would make it non-represented / confidential. So that exhibit that the commissioner is talking about has some language in red. If you click on that exhibit, you'll see language in red. That was the material that was added, and the board has to approve that additional material. That means that under the ERB rules, that employee would be classified as non-represented. And it has to do with handling material related to collective bargaining and attorney-client privileged information.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of if you can prepare the language and it can be,
It is in there, it just would have to be approved, but a board package.
Commissioner Bernie?
I bet this is Diana, here she comes.
In lieu of Diane's yet informing us, therefore speaking without information and not having read the attachment, my understanding is all this does is give commissioners an option. And my understanding is if we don't deal with giving us an option next week, then no commissioner has that option moving forward. And if that is stated correctly, it's not stated correctly. Would you state that correctly?
You have most of the options on there. The only option you do
Is
not
this one?
have is this one.
Right.
Because it requires board direction.
Right. So,
Yes.
I'm sorry. So to have this one,
Yes.
we would need to have board action, and all that Commissioner Buck is requesting is we place it on the agenda next week for board action so it's not delayed.
Correct, and it would be 2 items. We would need to add the FTE, and we would need to approve the job classification.
I'm a head nod.
Okay, can this be a consent calendar item? Okay. So let's go ahead with that then. I had 2 that I recall from that Mr. Mokrajewski made suggestion for. One was writing a letter to Congressman DeFazio, and I wrote this down, and I know it's not correct, but jail Medicare, I wrote as the subtext. I'm sure it has a fancier name. Medicaid, thank you. Congressman DeFazio urging him to become an Oregon sponsor, the only Oregon sponsor, to what NACO has been trying to get for a number of years. And I think they have a lot of co-sponsors. And I think that Alex Kyler could write that letter pretty quickly. And so I'd like to propose that as an agenda team request. Okay?
Good with it. I was going to ask for the same thing.
Everybody says yes to at least preparation of the letter. And it can go on the consent calendar. And then concerning the homeless state of emergency report back, I just want to say that I would like to see a symbolic homeless state of emergency board order and just say how important it is and that it is in fact an emergency. As to changes in any code, budget, or anything else, no, it is a symbolic act, but it's an important symbolic act. So I'll ask if there are 3 commissioners that wish to pursue that. Yes? Okay. I believe there are 3 commissioners.
I just want to make sure I saw 3.
Are there 3 commissioners?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay. Okay.
Just want to warn you, if we're going to do symbolic declarations for a petition of 100 people, we may get petitions of 100 people for symbolic declarations you're not going to like.
I agree. And
Opening a can of worms.
I agree, and commissioners have to come forward and say that they want to have that declaration, and if they are, and they make a good case, then we'll probably put it on our agenda.
So we will be discussing that later. Is that correct?
We will be putting it on our consent calendar, and you can pull it off if you
So
don't.
we could talk about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can always pull it off and say you're voting for it because it's symbolic, or you're voting against it because it's merely symbolic and you like more done than that. Or you're against symbolic
I'll think of a
measures or other. Okay, are there any other suggestions for agenda team requests at this time? All right, we'll go to work session requests. I'm not sure how we're going to distinguish these because we just did a work session request under agenda team requests, but are there any work session requests at this time? None. Okay. Then we're ready to have a review of assignments, and then we're ready to have a recess until 5:30, unless there's something else I'm not tracking. Ready for review of assignments?
Well, we'll find out.
Okay. We're ready for the first round of review of
I need to brush up
assignments.
on my note-taking skills here. That was quite a list. I had a presentation by Traveling County on the Lane County Cycling Project. I'm sorry, I didn't catch if it was a presentation from U.S. Forest Service, Good Neighbor Authority for ONC. It was a presentation, or I don't know if it was a work session.
Controverted ONC lands, yeah.
Presentation
It was a presentation.
by U.S. Forest Service on the Good Neighbor Authority for ONC lands. A letter to Congressman DeFazio requesting co-sponsorship of the healthcare, inmate healthcare in jails issue. A board order declaring a homeless state of emergency. I know Commissioner Buck had a third one, but I didn't catch that necessarily as an assignment. Was it?
I think it's just a board order for next.
Yes, yeah, but that's sort of that was direction on that, but I'm not counting that as an assignment. Okay. Did I miss anything? So I had those four.
You have the homeless, symbolic.
Yeah, that is number 4.
You have the Congressman DeFazio jail Medicaid matter.
Right.
The travel lane bicycling, the Good Neighbor Authority, Forest Service. Okay. That's what I have. All right, were there any other review of any other assignments made in the course of this excruciating meeting?
Yes, Chair Sorensen, I wanted to update and see if we could get some further direction on the work session on the aerial spray, the referral matter. That material, all 100 and odd zillion pages of it, no thanks to me, is up on the County Council website, and I actually sent all of you an email with what the title of it, where to find it, and a link. So if you do get inquiries about it, you can simply cut and paste the link, and it'll take them to the page. So I'd like some direction on picking the date of that work session. It's either the two that have been proposed by Ms. Jones are both Wednesdays. They're August 21st and August 28th. That's the first issue. And then the second one was the parameters around how that was going to work. I know that the folks forwarded a very detailed, almost like a court format. What I had envisioned was, because my material was going to be out there, would be simply that their legal expert, whoever it is, I think that's going to be Mr. Meek, would just be, he could just respond or say whatever he wanted to say based upon my opinion and what's out there, that I would respond if I thought it was necessary to what he said, and then it would just be, at that point, sort of Q&A from the board directed at the two attorneys. Their request, I'm not really, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, the issue here was legal. That was it was a legal issue, so I'm not really sure what having different people make 3-minute non-lawyers make 3-minute presentations, how that would assist in that process. And then the other thing is, I didn't know if you wanted, you're hearing from me, you're hearing from Mr. Meek. I didn't know if you wanted me to contact the attorney for the Oregon Farm Bureau, who, they're the one, he's the one who wrote the letter on behalf of the Oregon Farm Bureau, Mr. Chamoff, and or the person from Harangue Long, Mr. Gary. I didn't know if you wanted to hear from them. Or
What do you think of this idea? It's 3:30. The board's got to be back here in less than 2 hours. We just released the materials. The commissioners have not seen this email that I'm aware of. I mean, it was sent to me. the email that was, it was sent to Steve, okay. So, yeah, so what I'm saying is, why don't we slow this down a little bit and have you share the materials, or Commissioner Burney can share the materials with the board?
I'm not doing it.
Okay, very good. Well, we won't put that down as his assignment. I'm not doing it. What do you think of that, Mr. Dingle, just to get their request out, and then the board can consider it, as this percolates out? Because we just released a lot of material today, and a lot of people don't know we released a lot of material today, but they will be reading it soon. So, anyway.
I can send it out. It would be nice to pick the date, I guess.
It would be nice, but what I'm saying is, we just released, and it's extraordinary that we released a lot of information that a lot of people don't have in one place. And that may help us in planning the session.
It's for clarification, then on the assignment that's open, it will move to yellow because it does not
Yeah,
have a.
we don't have a date. Very good. Yeah. Yes.
I agree with you. I agree that we need to select the date. That's all we really need to do. Honestly, I didn't read all of what I forwarded you. So I don't think I think the issue is, whatever format allows people to hear from the attorneys. It makes sense. Whatever attorneys have an interest ought to be able to present, and we ought to be able to ask questions.
Well, I think you're in a very unusual position in that I've heard, at least based on the letter that Mr. Chamoff sent and the conversations with Mr. Gary, you're in a situation where you have attorneys who say that they're going to sue you if you do certain things. It's a rare circumstance that I get to sit there and talk to those people ahead of time and hear what they're going to, hear what their legal arguments are if you take a particular step. That doesn't happen every day. You typically find out when they file the complaint.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you're getting this stuff out to the public. It's already been out there.
Like 20 minutes.
Okay, and then we will have our public comment this evening. We'll get some feedback, I'm sure, and commissioners will have an opportunity.
I'll forward that email from that person.
And you'll forward the email to the commissioners that you received, and that'll also help formulate a plan for the work session.
And what I can do too is I will contact those two lawyers and say, if the board allows it, would you be interested in appearing?
Yeah, very good.
Gauge what they're interested in.
Okay, so at this time, I'm getting ready to pull us into our recess until 5:30, and then we'll keep the timer here and the gavel, so we'll be ready to roll at 5:30. Before I do that, I just want to turn to any commissioners, make sure or staff, make sure we're not forgetting anything before we go. Commissioner Burney.
Commissioner Sorensen is going to mention this tonight, but I just wanted to my fellow commissioners, as one who advocated that, one of many of us, that we have additional public input sessions. I had a previous engagement this evening, so I apologize. I want you to know that I have to honor that. It actually also is commission business, and Commissioner Sorensen will read a statement to that effect, but I want to apologize personally to you, and I don't anticipate this conflict will occur again.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for mentioning that. And Commissioner Buck will remind me to read it if I somehow forget, although he's got it right in front of me. Okay, so at this time, we will be in recess till 5. Oh,
Ms. Jones reminded me, I heard it on the thing. I will address the question that you had, Commissioner Posevich, about the county's ability to adopt a code language around having an earlier review of a charter amendment for compliance with the separate vote requirement.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and so can we put that on our review of assignments as well?
It's going to be in part of the work session that you set up.
Okay, very good. So at this time, we will be in recess until 5:30.